You know, when I talked about the Call of Duty League viewership relative to the LCS the other day, I didn't think that would be the start of a trend that is talking about Call of Duty esports more on this channel, because somehow League of Legends and that are crossing over in some ways. But alas, here we are, and it shouldn't be a surprise that it comes on the back of franchising potentially collapsing for the Call of Duty League, but it's not a bad thing. This is actually like one of the biggest dubs that Call of Duty esports has seen in a long time. So let's talk about what happened, how it relates to the LCS, and lessons that League of Legends can hopefully learn from the decisions being made today by Microsoft. Yes, Microsoft, don't forget they merged with Activision Blizzard, and I'm assuming that the merger is the reason why all this is happening in the first place. Point number one, the Call of Duty League is wiping out all franchise fees that were paid to the league. That includes Into the Future and payments already made. So yes, teams are getting a cash payment back for whatever they paid, which luckily one of the teams has actually revealed the exact amount of money that they're having, both the debt relief and the cash injection. They just got a one-time multi-million-dollar payment. That is not something that is ever going to probably happen again in esports, let alone the debt forgiveness. I mean, think about how much money and how much of a burden that is that you are now wiping away long term over the course of, I'm assuming, like 10 years, maybe more. Shout out to the organization for being willing to put these financials out there, being able to put this information out there. Granted, they're a publicly traded company, so I think it would have came out regardless. But the fact that we can actually put some math behind this is really good. Second, in case you're not familiar with Call of Duty and how the microtransactions of the game actually work, every single CDL team has a skin that you can directly buy in the game. You don't really see it much on terms of your operator, but you notably buy the whole team bundle, and it also includes a weapon skin. So yes, you can directly support the teams that you like in the Call of Duty League via in-game purchases, no matter what. It helps that there's only a few teams relative to League of Legends, but we'll talk about that later. The big change being made is that the percentage of revenue, or the cut that they get for each skin sale, is being bumped up. It's being increased. So say, made up number entirely, say they got 10% or 20% of those skin sales, because you have to cover the cost of making them, of the cost of the tech that it requires to put it in the game. Like, I can't speak on any of the back end stuff there, but regardless, they are getting a higher split, which means they are once again more incentivized to make sure that they prioritize getting people to directly buy their stuff in game, which helps develop fandom and loyalty in the game as well. I know in League we're not familiar with it, but at least within Call of Duty, you load in, you see somebody using an optic or phase pack, you either love them or really want to kick their ass the second you see it in game. The third one requires a little bit of explaining. So the old days of Call of Duty used to basically be an open circuit. You would have the championship, or like the world's equivalent in League of Legends, once a year, but beyond that it was just like whoever wanted to run tournaments, whether it was MLG, UMG, or anybody else technically could. I'm assuming they had to get permission from Activision Blizzard, but they bared all the costs for putting on the events. When the Call of Duty League franchise, I'm not sure exactly when this change happened, but I had a friend that worked at one of the Call of Duty League teams at the time that basically told me when they franchised, teams then bared the responsibility to put on these events. So if Optic, for example, wanted to host a LAN event in Texas in their designated area, they would bear the responsibility of the cost. They would obviously see the benefit and the upside if they got people to attend and everything else. You had to find a way to run a profitable event to actually make money, otherwise you're just losing money on all of them, and there weren't really that many orgs, honestly, that could probably run a profitable LAN. But regardless, the change now is that the subsidy that the Call of Duty League gives to each organization to encourage them to put on these events is going to be increased even further. So basically, say it costs $3 million estimate to put on an event. Activision Blizzard made up number, say, was previously covering $1 million. Say they're going to cover $2 million now. You just then bear the responsibility of making sure that you can get enough people there and monetize enough that you cover that $1 million, and anything extra is money in your pocket, in addition to obviously growing fandom. This is a good change. This will make sure that more events likely get put on. Teams are more encouraged to put on these events. Given what we just saw, that the Carolina major was canceled for reasons that we don't know, I'm assuming it's related to cost in some way, shape, or form, whether that's the event just got too expensive and they just couldn't make it work, so they canned it. I don't know, but in theory, this should encourage more LAN events, which is a foreign concept to League of Legends fans. And finally, one that we actually are familiar with in regards to the LCS is that there is going to be a minimum revenue guarantee for the next 2 years. So any team participating in the Call of Duty League gets a certain amount of money each and every year, no matter what, for 2 years. So what does all this mean for both teams and fans? We'll start with the teams. You just got a multi-million-dollar cash injection and the relief of millions, tens of millions of future debt. This is the closest thing that an esports organization can possibly have to winning the lottery. This just got dumped in your lap. So now the question becomes, what do executives do within each individual team? Do they decide, hey, I'm gonna pocket the cash? Because they have no obligation to anybody to spend that money back on the Call of Duty League, back on their team, back on the fans. If they truly care about the franchise, it would be in their best interest to do that long term, but there is no guarantee that they're going to. If they do, and the second option being decide to invest it back into their franchise, this is where the fans see benefit. This is where you directly see esports start to come into basically its second prosperity. This is where you see Call of Duty start to have its potential revival. I'm in New York, for example. There is currently no New York Subliners watch party consistently each and every week for their matches. Whether it's online or not, you could just pick a spot here and have a watch party and give fans a consistent place to go. It's the same thing that I preach for the LCS all the time, except now they are actually geolocated. They actually have a New York team, so there is direct benefit to investing that money into developing fandom in this area, which would then mean when the next New York major comes here, whenever they do pay less to have that event here in New York, they benefit even more from. If you see these millions directly invested into the communities where these teams actually are located, the future is amazing for Call of Duty, let alone the fact that this means that we could potentially see more events given how much less teams are going to pay for them. On the fan side, please hold your orgs accountable. As much as I would love to see the LA Thieves or like the 100 Thieves parent company take that money and buy us a League of Legends Challenger team, don't let them spend the money elsewhere. Cause outrage if it's not directly going back into your fandom, into your experience as a fan of your team. They just got a few $1 million. You should see immediate benefit of that. As for the league as a whole, kind of fitting them at NHL headquarters, let's talk about expansion. Because now that there is no fee to, in theory, enter the Call of Duty League, it does not cost anything. It is now purely up to ownership and the CDL to come to agreement and come to terms with expansion. It's literally just a matter of allowing, say, 4 more teams in and letting them field a roster. That's it. Then you have 16 teams in the league. Then you have 4 groups of 4 for pool play into double bracket or double elimination bracket, similar to what Call of Duty used to be. In theory, there's no entry fee. You could also play against amateur teams and bring them into full open qualifying events. Like, I don't know what this means in terms of restrictions that Microsoft and the Call of Duty League might have in terms of preventing AMs from playing with the teams in the league. But now that it costs nothing and there is no barrier, in theory, it's just stupid owners preventing anybody else from playing against them and devaluing their brand, because in theory there's nothing else blocking the way anymore. You have people in the League of Legends scene like I Will Dominate literally saying, hey, let's get into Call of Duty. Cloud9 has shown interest in coming to Call of Duty. Force all of these teams to still pick areas and develop fandom in those specific spots. You can have 1 or 2 online, like personality-based teams, sure. But I still think being tied to an individual area is gonna be where the best use of money, of resources, and everything else is gonna be, because local fandom is the one thing that we have never tapped into properly in esports, and now is the golden opportunity to do so. For owners that also have a League of Legends team, this just put a ton of pressure on Riot. Riot now has to be looking at this as the only remaining franchise league here in North America that is still requiring teams to pay back their franchise fees. Now, granted, the LCS has paused payments, but as of right now, the assumption is that they will come due at some point in time, and they also have not been reimbursed for the prior fees that they have already established or already paid in. So the LCS is now the only remaining franchise league by like old standards here in North America. And if I'm looking at that and I'm looking to Riot, I'm saying, what are you doing? The LCS has no team skins, has no ability to directly support your individual team in the league relative to any of these other systems, which are entirely open and require nothing to get into. Well, not entirely open. Obviously, the owners would have to agree to expansion, but in theory, there's nothing blocking it anymore. This just basically killed the value of franchising for the LCS. And that is not me saying that we need to go back to promotion relegation. I still don't agree with that system, but what I do agree with is the point that I keep coming back to. We need more money invested into fandom, and we're about to find out whether Call of Duty does that right or not. At a closing statement level, it is a better time right now to be a Call of Duty fan than it is a League of Legends fan in North America. You are more likely to get products that you can buy into fandom with. You are more likely to get in-person experiences with the Call of Duty League than you are with the LCS. And as of right now, based on the statements that we've seen from John Needham, which we'll get into the revenue share and like how money is distributed on Friday and the changes that are coming to the LoL esports ecosystem, I don't see an alleyway in sight yet for how the LCS solves its lack of localization and lack of local fandom problem, let alone the in-game monetization. Honestly, it's wild because one of the main reasons why I started watching League of Legends esports is because I felt like for years we were mistreated by Activision Blizzard and nobody really ever cared about Call of Duty esports other than like the individual people itself. You always looked at Riot as this bastion of hope when it came to esports, but now they are so far behind the ball. They are so slow in reacting to all of these things, despite Microsoft and Activision Blizzard being a bigger company. I always wanted the Call of Duty League to be more like the LCS, and for the first time ever, wholeheartedly, I want every single thing about the LCS to be more like the Call of Duty League. That is wild.